During the era of the Master System, the gaming landscape in the United States was largely dominated by the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo had successfully revitalized the North American gaming industry after the video game crash in 1983 and had a stranglehold on the market with its iconic console. The NES became a cultural phenomenon with its recognizable grey box and game cartridges. It captured the imagination of players with titles like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, establishing Nintendo as the powerhouse of the gaming industry. The NES's extensive library, effective marketing, and family-friendly image solidified its popularity among casual and hardcore gamers. In contrast, Sega faced significant challenges in establishing a foothold in the American gaming market. While the Master System had succeeded greatly in Europe and Brazil, its rival in the US presented a much tougher battle. Sega's reputation primarily lay in the arcade industry, and it faced an uphill struggle in persuading American consumers to embrace its home console. So with that said, I am Lady Decade, and this is how the Sega Master System failed in North America. In the mid-1980s, after the fallout of the North American regional video game crash, the gaming industry would suddenly experience a surge in popularity after Nintendo seized the opportunity to slide in with their localized version of the Nintendo Famicom. Before the epic rivalry between the two giants Nintendo and Sega, many others such as the Pewter Jr., Casio PV1000 and Gakken Compact TV Boy were showing up but not even getting a look in. These consoles went head-to-head with Nintendo during the 8-bit era of gaming and were quickly obliterated and almost forgotten completely as a result. The Nintendo Entertainment System was, unit for unit, the most popular gaming platform in the world. Despite this, that did not mean the system did not have decent competition or adversaries that would put up a decent fight. While the Nintendo Entertainment System dominated the American gaming market with its iconic characters and addictive gameplay, a challenger emerged from the shadows determined to carve out its own place in the hearts of gamers. This challenger was none other than the Master System, Sega's answer to the NES. But the path to success in the land of Nintendo would prove to be an arduous one. The Master System faced formidable challenges from an established competitor with a loyal fan base to a gaming market heavily influenced by Nintendo's dominance. Yet Sega's determination and innovation would set the stage for a fierce battle, shaping the gaming landscape for years. After all, the Master System defeated Nintendo in Europe, South America, and Oceania simultaneously, making 3 of the world's continents Sega territory. The Master System had a lot of upsides to it and, in many ways, was technically superior to the NES. With its sleek black design and promises of cutting-edge technology, the Master System arrived on American shores armed with a library of games that held the potential to rival even the most beloved titles on the NES. The Master System was the most likely in the world during the 8-bit era to have taken Nintendo's throne. Sega, a company with a history in arcade gaming, saw an opportunity to bring the arcade experience into American homes, captivating players with impressive graphics and immersive gameplay. Despite this, the Master System would never become the most popular 8-bit platform in the world. One major hurdle Sega encountered was Nintendo's strong grip on third-party developers. Nintendo had implemented strict licensing and quality control policies that restricted the availability of games on competing platforms. Many developers opted to create games exclusively for the NES, leaving the Master System with a limited library and fewer high-profile titles. Additionally, Nintendo had already established a wide network of retailers and distributors, making securing shelf space and retail partnerships challenging for Sega. Nintendo's dominant market presence made it difficult for the Master System to gain visibility and attract consumers from the NES. Moreover, Sega faced the perception that the Master System was an inferior console due to its earlier release in Japan and its lower popularity in the US. This perception hindered its ability to compete against the NES and win over skeptical gamers. Despite these challenges, Sega persisted and made concerted efforts to market the Master System as a technologically superior alternative to the NES. They highlighted its advanced graphics, backward compatibility with Sega's arcade titles, and enhanced sound capabilities. However, overcoming Nintendo's market dominance proved grueling for Sega, and the Master Master System struggled to gain significant traction in the American gaming market. Before sinking our teeth into what went wrong with the Master System in North America further, we should first look at why the system came to exist in the first place. There is a key difference between the Master System and many other 8-bit platforms that went up against the Famicom. Platforms like the Atari 2800 and PV1000 were not equipped hardware-wise to compete with Nintendo and saw release in Japan in the same year the Famicom launched. Sega had already been competing with Nintendo for the previous 2 years with the release of their first 8-bit console, the Sega SG-1000. The SG-1000 was released on the same day as the Famicom in a knee-jerk reaction from Sega, created from the fear that once Nintendo conquered the console market, they may try and eat further into Sega's established arcade market share. The SG-1000 was weak and ill-equipped to compete with the Famicom and featured a similar spec to the ColecoVision. This product that was rushed to the market failed to compete with the more polished Nintendo platform. The Sega Master System, on the other hand, was released 2 years after the Famicom, so Sega had time to work on a device that was technically superior to the Nintendo hardware. Before the launch of the Master System, Sega would try its hand in 1984 with the release of the Sega SG-1000 Mark II, which was mostly just a simple casing redesign rather than a major hardware revision. The SG-1000 Mark III, though, would change everything. This system would be more powerful than not only the SG-1000, but the Famicom as well, and even come equipped with a Sega card slot, allowing consumers to play games using Sega card software. The advantage of these cards was that they were much cheaper to produce than cartridges, offering consumers a more affordable way to play games. It would not be long before the system would be remodeled for the North American market, much like the reworking of the Famicom into the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Mark III would be rebranded to the Sega Master System and restyled into its iconic, sexy, sleek black casing. The Master System would see a launch in North America in September 1986. This is 11 months after the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System in the region. However, despite this, Sega faced a considerable disadvantage in marketing and promoting the Master System in the United States. Nintendo had already established a strong brand presence and had successfully positioned the NES as the premier gaming console. Sega employed various marketing strategies to position the Master System as a worthy alternative to the NES. For its time, the NES was the most popular game console on the North American continent of all time, and is credited for rejuvenating the market after the failings of Atari back in 1983. Some of Nintendo's success is thought to be getting their products on shelves as toys. As we know, this was done by pairing the device with a light gun and Rob the Robot, and reshaping the device to look closer to a VCR rather than a traditional game console. Paired with the killer app Super Mario Bros., Nintendo's plan went down accordingly, and now Sega wanted to cash in on console's resurgence in the region. Over in Japan, the SG-1000 Mark III/Master System had already been around for a full year and was not doing well in the country. Rather than this being put down to issues with the hardware itself, Sega's lack of success was partially down to Nintendo's shady licensing practices that would prevent third-party developers from creating games with the Sega hardware if they were publishing games already on the Famicom. To combat this issue, Sega would have to develop its own games heavily and obtain the rights to port games from non-Nintendo hardware. Another aspect of Sega's marketing strategy was its focus on showcasing the technological superiority of the Master System. They emphasized the console's advanced graphics and sound capabilities compared to the NES. Sega touted the system's ability to provide an arcade-like experience at home, capitalizing on its reputation as a leading arcade game manufacturer. By highlighting these features, Sega aimed to attract gamers who sought a more immersive and visually impressive gaming experience. However, the biggest problem with Sega's marketing seemed to be its low budget. Sega Retro, citing the Ultimate History of Video Games book, would explain that Sega of America's marketing arm was peanuts compared to Nintendo's. Its consumer products division had only opened in April 1986 and consisted of 2 men, Bruce Lowry and Bob Harris, and a couple of administrators working out of a small office next to Sega's local coin-op division. J. Walter Thompson was hired to manage Sega's $9 million USD marketing budget, producing the packaging for the console and its initial array of games, and within 2 months, the team at Sega had created a 1,800 square foot booth for Summer Consumer Electronics Show 1986. Prior to Summer CES 1986, Sega had sold home video games in the US through third-party publishers and distributors, but the brand was not instantly recognizable. Some at the event even mistook the company at the event for Saga Foods, bemused that a food distributor would enter the video game business. Sega Retro explains that after several months of poor sales, Hayao Nakayama, the then CEO of Sega, would step in and sell a 2-year distribution deal to Tonka of all companies. I imagine that this is because they were a notable toy company, which was a way to imitate how Nintendo had successfully placed themselves in the market. However, Tonka had zero experience distributing electronics, so the Master System was completely new territory for the company. Like Sega, Tonka would do a poor job of distributing the Master System across the US. The company would make bizarre decisions, including blocking the localization of several popular games. At the end of the day though, Tonka would face many of the same challenges as Sega when marketing the system, as Nintendo had everything locked down. To compete with Nintendo's strong first-party titles, Sega secured licensing deals with third-party developers to bolster their game library. They worked with renowned developers such as Activision and Electronic Arts to release popular titles for the Master System. This approach aimed to provide a diverse range of games to attract gamers seeking a broader selection beyond what the NES offered. However, despite Sega's marketing efforts, they faced significant challenges and disadvantages compared to Nintendo. Nintendo had already secured a firm grip on the market, which made it difficult for Sega to gain widespread recognition and acceptance. Nintendo's restrictive licensing policies made it harder for Sega to secure popular third-party titles, limiting the availability of highly sought-after games for the Master System. Additionally, Nintendo's established relationships with retailers and distributors gave them a significant advantage in terms of shelf space and market presence. Furthermore, Sega had to combat the perception that the Master System was an inferior console due to its later entry into the US market and the dominance of the NES. Nintendo's extensive library of iconic games and their family-friendly image had already won over the hearts of many gamers, making it challenging for Sega to convince consumers to switch to their consoles. The system was released in the United States for $200, the same as paying roughly $530 for a console today. However, this was a similar price point to that of Nintendo's product just 1 year earlier. The system came packed with a multi-cart including both Hang-On and Safari Hunt, along with what they like to refer to as 2 high-speed controllers. The system also came packed with the Sega Light Phaser, a light gun which was Sega's answer to the Nintendo Zapper. In the platform's launch year, Sega hoped to sell 400,000 to 750,000 units in North America. However, sadly, the Master System would only manage 125,000 units. On the other hand, Nintendo would shift 1.1 million NESs, outselling the Sega platform by close to 10-1. Part of this was probably down to the agreements Nintendo had in place, which prevented Sega from being able to strike deals with many development houses. Sega Retro outlines the licensing agreements that Nintendo had with its third-party game developers may have had an impact as well. The agreement stated in effect that developers would produce games for the NES only. However, Sega did have the advantage of being able to pluck titles from their ever-growing arcade game library at the time, and so was able to build up a strong library of exclusive Master System titles. Nintendo's licensing practices were hindering Sega to no end, and only a handful of third-party publishers, including Activision, Electronic Arts, and the Parker Brothers, had chosen to back the Master System. So, despite having a few iconic titles, including Alex Kidd in Miracle World, Phantasy Star, and Wonder Boy 3, these just weren't enough to put a chink in Nintendo's armor. So, between locking third-party publishers and retailers into exclusivity deals, Nintendo had come extremely close to completely monopolizing gaming during the 80s in the US, offering consumers fewer gaming choices than ever before. In fact, in the region, the Master System would even be outsold outsold by the bloody Atari 7800. The Atari 8-bit system, released in 1986, looked to cash in on the console craze that Nintendo had resurrected. Unlike Sega at the time, Atari had good brand recognition in the region, and the 7800 was even backwards compatible with the 2600, meaning consumers could go back and play their already established library of games. So the Master System was very much the third place 8-bit system, without even mentioning the turbo graphics that would arrive on the scene later. While the Master System couldn't match the NES's popularity, it was a stepping stone for Sega's subsequent consoles. Sega took the lessons learned from the Master System era and applied them to developing the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive. The Genesis became Sega's most successful console in the US, offering enhanced graphics, a strong game library, and intense competition with Nintendo's Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The lessons Sega learned from the Master System's market struggles helped shape the company's approach to hardware, software, and marketing, establishing a foundation for its future successes. Most importantly, as we know, the system would eventually feature its own killer app in the form of Sonic the Hedgehog, undeniably one of the most important video game characters ever created. This new success would finally significantly cut into Nintendo's marketing share, even outselling them in the region for a time. This would eventually lead to Sega going as far as buying back the rights to the distribution of the Master System, which would in turn result in the release of the Master System 2, a budget alternative to the Genesis, which would still allow users to experience a Sonic the Hedgehog game. In fact, Sonic the Hedgehog, released for the Master System in 1991, would be the final release of a first-party Master System game seeing a release on US soil. In other regions where the Master System prospered, such as Europe, South America, and Oceania, we would see games for years. We would see many first-party and third-party releases, including several Sonic titles, Mortal Kombat, and even Street Fighter. Sega would eventually conquer the USA with their Sega Genesis. However, if it were not for the learning from the missteps the company had taken with the Master System in the region earlier, then maybe taking the market in the area would never have happened. If you enjoyed this, then subscribe. Ciao!